Hello and welcome to Wrestling and Everything, Coast to Coast, with your host, Buddy Sotelo Esquire, Dr. Mike Leno, and Evan Ginsberg. And I want to just say tonight is a very special show. Dr. Mike, why don't you tell us all why?
Well, it's with a heavy heart. Obviously, we lost one of the true legends. I mean, we talk about legends all the time in wrestling on like Busted Open, Sirius XM channel 156. Every platform, everybody's always talking about legends, but we're talking about a true legend to us, not just in Los Angeles wrestling and music and arts and entertainment and grindhouse and art films and so many things that our first speaker, Evan Ginsberg, one of our co-hosts, my best friend on the planet, longest friend, along with Brittany Brown, who will be speaking a little bit later, a ton of guests. We're talking about Johnny Legend, Martin Margulies, his sister Lynn and her husband had a cat vet emergency, but they'll be joining us later. And we're talking about Johnny, who passed on January 2nd. So I've kind of put my life on hold since then to make this the best possible tribute show worthy of Johnny Legend from wrestling. I mean, the guy we'll be talking to Glenn Bray about them becoming friends at an early age and then starting to go to the Olympic Auditorium and the LA Sports Arena to see everybody's hero, classy Freddie Blassie, then a heel, take on everybody. Ed Carpentier, WWA World Title Battle, Bobo Brazil, Bearcat Wright, our Jackie Robinson of pro wrestling, Pedro Morales, Gorilla Monsoon, uh, George Crybaby Cannon, Crazy Luke Graham, a zillion folks, and of course the heel series with Dick the Bruiser, who I think lifted our WWA World Championship, took it back, literally stole it, and took it back to Indianapolis to start his own WWA promotion. But anyway, well, I mean, Evan Ginsberg had one of the longest running sheet newsletters. Didn't expose the biz. It was a nostalgia newsletter, wrestling then and now. That I was with him and so many others who contributed every month well, Evan will tell us how long. Evan has done wrestling, TV, radio shows, a zillion things. He's got, I mean, 350 Days. He was co-executive producer on that. The same with Darren Aronofsky's masterful. This is perhaps one of the biggest directors on the planet with so many masterpieces. But The Wrestler, starring Mickey Rourke, Evan provided all of the wrestlers, helped work choreographing all of that stuff. Evan, tell us about yourself because I can't even do you justice. Evan Ginsberg, everybody, on our Johnny Legends tribute show.
I appreciate it. And thanks, Brittany. Brittany and I go way back also. And it's great to have everybody on the show. And let me just say something. This is really from the heart. I knew Johnny Legend. And here's a guy who said, it's not about benefits and pensions. It's about following your muse. It's about following your heart. He was a rockabilly musician. He was a film producer, an actor, a wrestling manager, a wrestling promoter, a supporter of Grindhouse and other films. He melded horror movies, rock and roll, lucha libre. Not everybody can say that. He was responsible for the recording of classy Freddie Blassie's Pencil Neck Geek. That'll live forever. He did the movie, produced the movie My Breakfast with Blassie with Andy Kaufman. So here's a guy who was on the level that he could work with geniuses like Freddie Blassie and Andy Kaufman. How many people can say that? And he also was an actor, and he was in horror films like Bride of Reanimator, Children of the Corn 3, etc. I don't want to bore everybody with a lengthy filmography, but the guy did everything. The guy did everything, and probably in the long run, he sacrificed financially, not having that steady gig, not having those benefits and pension and whatnot. And it's a choice, but ultimately, the art that Johnny Legend created will live forever, will live forever. And that's why I write books like Wrestling Rings, Blackboards, and movie sets and such, because when I'm gone, the books, the movies will be here. And I understand a guy like Johnny Legend. And we have a ton of guests, so I'm going to keep it at that. But much respect and love to somebody who had the courage to follow his muse rather than some soul-killing 9 to 5 corporate gig, which is fine if that's, good for somebody else, but it wasn't for him. It wasn't for him. And his art will be here forever. 100 years from now, when we're all gone, people will be sitting and laughing, watching Breakfast with Blassie. He will be entertaining people 100, 200, 300 years from now, forever. His is a piece of immortality. And I'm going to leave it at that. Mike, let's go to the next guest.
I want to say something though about that's your last book cover, and Johnny would love this because it's important people in your life, everybody's life. From Bruno Sammartino next to a caricature drawing of Richard Pryor, then which adult film star is up there next to John Lennon?
That's Desiree Cousteau, John Lennon, Nicole Bass, Killer Kowalski, the Valiant Brothers, Seika, Nikolai, Lanny Poffo, a dear friend, Nicole Bass with the muscles. These are all dear friends of mine. So I understand. I get. I'm not going to say they're all dear friends. I didn't know John Lennon, obviously. But my point being, at some point, our lives collided, just like Johnny Legends with people like Blassie and Andy Kaufman and many, many, many more. So I get it. I've lived it. Anyway, I don't want this to be about me. Mike, let's go to the next guest.
Go to our next guest, and this was my boss in the Los Angeles wrestling territory, my immediate boss in the Eaton LaBelle promotion. But he was the first, and he was part of Johnny's 60s group, the people that knew him best. I only knew Johnny, met him, and became friends in 1970. But Jeff and Glenn and the rest knew him far longer and better. Jeff went to all those shows, all the amazing Blassie stuff. Jeff ran the first and best Freddie Blassie fan club with his friend, who became one of our great ring announcers underneath the greatest ring announcer, boxing or wrestling or MMA ever. There's no question of a doubt. Howard Finkel, close number 2. Jimmy Lennon Sr., the absolute greatest of all time. Dick Lane up there on the Mount Rushmore for play-by-play announcers. But Jeff did so many things in the LaBelle promotion. He had to give up the Blassie fan club. That's when afterwards I co-ran it in the 70s. It was called King of Men. Our bulletin was called King of Men. And Blassie's 1975 recorded 4-song fantastic LP was called King of Men. Jeff ring announced, promoted El Monte in other towns. He did locker room interviews, trading off with Gene and Miguel Alonso and Luis Magana, all of our legends we love so much in Los Angeles, and a million other things. Tux Newman in Memphis, when our promotion closed in December 1982 in Los Angeles, went to Memphis and worked with Andy Kaufman. I mean, and that's the bare tip of the iceberg for the great Jeff Walton, who's a lifelong friend of all of ours. Jeff and Scott.
It's wonderful to hear those praises, but the praises again belong to Martin. Here it's amazing. I went to high school, I went to wrestling, and when I get to wrestling, there were 2 or 3 guys there that I really loved, and we started our friendship. One was Glenn Bray, one was Dennis, who's passed on, and then there was Martin. And Martin was always a number 1 character, but a character that loved people and loved what he did, and there wasn't anything he couldn't do. And there were times when years would go by and I would never hear from him or see him, but I always wondered what he was doing. And he'd always come back and said, well, I've been in the United Kingdom. I have a band. We're playing there. I've been in Germany, and the band's been playing there. And it was amazing to me that these things were happening. And the only way I got some news was from Glenn, because Glenn and Martin, as you'll find out, were pretty darn close. But we all grew up together. And then, I got deeper into the wrestling business. But before that, there were times, I'll tell you a story. Martin always had a camera, and he used to take pictures of the wrestlers, as we all kind of did. But in those days, Dick the Bruiser was the champion. The Bruiser would come in on the Olympic wrestling shows every other Friday night. And I remember one time, and I don't know if Glenn remembers this or not, when Martin got right into the Bruiser's face. And I couldn't believe it. And the Bruiser kept saying, "Get out of my way, kid. Get out of my way." And Martin wouldn't do it. And finally the Bruiser says, "Give me your camera." No, he wasn't going to do it. And the Bruiser started chasing him around that back parking lot, which was just the most hysterical thing you could see. And there was another time when Martin and we went to the Outer Limits auction, the TV show. Ooh. And it was out of business, and they were having a sale of all their artifacts and their things. I don't know if Glenn went, but he'll tell you later, I'm sure. But Martin and I were there, and there was a little kid there, a tiny young kid, I'd say maybe 8 or 9. And he started bidding on all the Outer Limits props. And he won them. And we couldn't get a bid in edgewise. And, it annoyed me. It really annoyed me. Here's this little kid with his father. Turns out the little kid had, let's see if I can remember his name, Ronnie Howard. Ron Howard? Wow. Yeah, Ron Howard. Wow. And we didn't like him at that time. But anyway, Martin got a Outer Limits monster costume. Head, the whole body, the feet, everything. So I think a few weeks or maybe a few months after that, we have a downtown LA, a park. It's called Pershing Square. It's right in the middle of downtown LA. And in Pershing Square are all the kooks and all the people that are spouting about religion and everything. And Martin wanted to go there. So we went there. I went there. I think Glenn went there. I'm not sure, but he'll tell you. But anyway, Martin puts on the costume, starts walking around the park in this horrible monster costume, and everybody's kind of looking, but there's many people that are walking by him not paying even an attention. But he starts talking to these people and saying things that I can't say here, but fun stuff. And it was hysterical and something I'll never forget. And then there were times when I worked his 2 shows at Moguls in Hollywood. He had a few shows there with his wrestling. And I noticed that after the wrestling was over, he'd have his band or one of the bands play. And I'd never heard that in wrestling. And at this time, I had been in the business a while. And I said, I don't know if that goes. I don't know if that's a big thing. And yet the more I heard of it, the more I enjoyed it. And he put on one heck of a show. And I wish it would have been more successful. And the one thing I really hoped for was that one day Martin would get a spot in one of the big wrestling organizations or something, to be a manager and to be able, he could talk like no one could talk. And he was a talented all-around guy. And, it's a sad day. And the only thing else I'd like to add, and from the bottom of our hearts, is that my deepest sympathy goes out to Lynn and her family. And you'll see Lynn has a lot to tell you. And, we went to all kinds of events together. One time Martin said, I want you to come with me to a theater up in Hollywood. They're showing, Andy Warhol is showing his latest feature, his movie. And I said, well, what's the movie? And he says, well, you'll see. It's a lot of fun. I said, okay. So if Martin said it's a lot of fun, it's going to be good. So we go to this movie on Sunset Boulevard. I pay the admission. I sit down. On the screen is a picture of the Empire State Building. And Glenn was with us. That I do remember. And Glenn is saying, this is great. And I said, Glenn, how long is this movie? And Glenn said, 6 hours, I think. And it's not a movie. We stare and we look at the Empire State Building and we just get what we can out of it. And Martin said, this is amazing. You're going to love this. So I sat there for about a half hour, and I wasn't into it, and but they were, and this is things you did, and we had such good times and such good laughs, and later on we had more laughs, and I'd have parties at my home, and we'd watch old movies, and even though I hadn't heard from Martin maybe in again years, all of a sudden there'd be a knock on my door, and there would be Martin, and he would come in, tell us what he had been doing, and watched the old movies, and he was just fixed on it, and we had a good time. Those were good times, and those are times I'll never forget, as well as Glenn and Dennis and Martin and the amazing Johnny Legend.
Jeff, before we get to Scott, and everybody hang tight because I'm going to come back to all of you at different points tonight. And next we're going to go to Brittany. But I wanted to say this because I think I said it before the show, but we have a little bit later. It might take some time because of the time difference in London. But Johnny had his band. He did lots of different genres of rock, but obviously rockabilly was the most famous. And Rockabilly Magazine Monthly, prestigious magazine for that genre of music. The editor, they've written stories on him, so the editor is going to be calling in, being part of this. I asked for a statement from The Onion that had, Johnny had contributed to it. Some of you guys may not know this when it had its big heyday 20 some odd years ago as a free newspaper every day. But now it's a monthly newspaper you can buy and see, or just sit there and read and not pay for it at Barnes & Noble, like I do. And it's a satirical, it's just funny. They're going after, our current administration as they do all administrations, but they sent me this to read on air, and I have statements from Danny Westbrook and Steve Yohe. They're a little bit shy. They say they're not great talkers, so they sent me statements. But the Onion Comedy Global newspaper sent me, Johnny truly was a legend, and that's no joke, because they're a joke newspaper. I want to say very quickly that Lynn's current husband, after Andy Kaufman, met Johnny when he was 3. So what a small world. That was kind of an incredible stat. Johnny, who I wrote about in the magazines as a human tornado, human dynamo. All of you guys know he had more energy than all of us combined. I've requested every Hall of Fame in the past since Johnny passed, starting with WWE's Hall of Fame. I know, anyway, asked that they bring in Johnny and Dick Lane as well, and Jimmy Lennon Sr. All three should be recognized from our area, but they were global talents. Jimmy Lennon announced in Japan and for boxing everywhere. He learned the languages, it influenced me to learn Japanese and Spanish. Jimmy spoke impeccably, if he was announcing someone in Korean, it was perfect Korean. That's what a professional he was. The uncle of the famous Lennon sisters from Lawrence Welk. He could sing beautifully, as you guys know. He sang at roller derby, pro wrestling sister sport. Actually, it was roller games, Bill Griffiths, L.A., as opposed to the more athletic Seltzer family of roller derby. But he sang at Shirley Hardman, the Freddie Blassie of roller games in L.A. with the T-Birds, her funeral. Jimmy Lennon sang and gave the first eulogy. I was there. Jeff, I think, was too. Johnny had his ISW, Incredibly Strange Wrestling, very influential. Every promotion stole from it. Pro Wrestling Guerrilla admits it. Like, for example, at their 2012 big, huge show, which was the capper at the WrestleCon, the best wrestling convention. High Spots puts it on. It's the most ethical, honest, the biggest in the world. They named every time they did a show, it was themed, and that one for that year, Scott might remember, was called Kurt WrestleMania, a play on WrestleMania, but kind of brilliant. Everybody and their brother, Kazarian, Chris Daniels will be on later, and Samoa Joe, Bryan Danielson, everybody in the world that was an incredible athlete was there. But Johnny's ISW promotion, before we get to Brittany Brown, who's coming up next, I was there when they had venues that were sold out in LA, up and down the coast. When he'd come up to bring his shows to San Francisco, he'd stay at my house, which was then on the water over there. He liked that. Another time he came when he was a little bit down and out at like 2:15 in the morning. I'm sure he did that with Jeff, Glenn, probably all of us. to crash, and made sure he got food and water and some clean clothes and stuff. And after X period of time, he went up and moved up with Lynn, who left. I mean, she's a big heavyweight producer, director, everything in Hollywood. Glenn can probably speak more to that. And I think that's why she moved to Oregon, just for a little peace and quiet away from the zaniness. Why we have the Golden Globes in competition to our Johnny Legend tribute show. I have no clue. But let's go to Brittany Brown, who not just a great friend of all of us into wrestling. She's given back so much. Trained by, and Jeff, I got to say, I was a mark for Killer Kowalski. I know you think he may not have done the business with Tolis Blassie. I mean, he wins in a phantom title switch in Florida, although Killer Kowalski was actually there. I don't know why you guys didn't send Cowboy Frankie Lane with the America's title there, but he drops it allegedly to Kowalski December 1971, and Walter finishes up for Eddie Graham there, his promotion, and comes out and was this incredible killer heel I've been dying to see. And he came in, he squashed Cowboy Lane in the rematch for the title, squashed Soul Man Rocky Johnson, who our Jeff Walton gave him that Soul Man name that he used forever after, and owes some big bucks to Jeff. You're talking about money. He owes you some big bucks for that tag. And
he too should be in the WWE Hall of Fame, added to that list.
Well, Kowalski is in their Hall of Fame, but John Tolis and Chris Tolis should be, because then Kowalski feuds with them. He teams with Kenji Shibuya, the Dream heel tag team, and they had it had to have been a shoot legit 50 minutes, although it was billed as an hour. But they worked hard. Chris Tolis lost his boot, shoot, and kept wrestling the entire match. He didn't go back to put it on. That was a classic main event. And you look at what we had in 72. Brittany, I'm sorry. Give me 10 seconds. I know. Wrap it up. They're playing the applause noise for me now. But if you look at the heels we had Kowalski come in, and then superstar Billy Graham comes in from Roy Shire after he had the World Tag Championships up there. That was the fourth version of it for the NWA. San Francisco with Pat Patterson, but he's working as the Spirit of America with like cowboy, whatever they call it, goofy looking leather jacket. He comes down to LA and debuts the superstar tie-dye look. And then he finesses it in the AWA, Houston for Paul Bosch, goes to and becomes the biggest thing Tri-WF and Vince Senior had ever seen. He debuted the look in Los Angeles. We had Ernie Ladd. We had so many classic heels in 1972 alone. I still lament that we never got the Freddie Blassie Killer Kowalski match, because I guess he had the higher paying gig Toto with Tom in Japan for Giant Baba before. Well, no, that was before All Japan started. But, so the angle was that Kowalski broke his leg, and Bruno Sammartino, Fred's friend, although they were legit friends for reals, but not in the worked world, came in to battle Kowalski. Anyway, Brittany Brown, lady wrestler, trained by Walter Kowalski, brings it full circle, Trump-like. Brings it full circle, but she helped train some of Walter's other proteges. I mean, there was Perry Satner and John Cronus, and China, obviously, a little later. Triple H is whatever crazy name, terrorizing, that Walter gave him. She wrestled, she promoted, she's done everything in the business, successful business person, and she was with Walter in the Fox series of TV specials. Anyway, Brittany Brown, let me shut up, and the platform's yours.
Oh, well, thank you. Yes, I was trained by Walter and also the fabulous Moolah. Proud to say both of them. And if it wasn't for either of them, I wouldn't be here. But we're talking about Johnny Legend tonight. So we will move on to that, because that's way more important than anything I can say about my past. Johnny was a great guy. I met him in LA. I was going to work for him. And unfortunately, because of my commitments with Walter, it never happened. But I followed his career. We talked multiple times. Great guy. Everything that he did, as far as I'm concerned, turned to gold. He was just one of those that whatever he decided to do, it worked. And, I'm proud to be part of this. And I thank you, Mike, for asking me to be on. On to the next person. I don't want to take up too much time.
Oh, no. And, well, wait, tell us, you were on with Walter on that TV series. You've worked all over. You broke in various people like Brandy Alexander. Jerry, that was her work name, and several others that were on WCW when you should have been on there. Far superior ring work, but you've done a ton of stuff, and you were the youngest. I was the youngest CAC executive board member, but then I think you came aboard, and you were the youngest then. You and Sheldon Goldberg came in, and props to Sheldon, who just had triple bypass, and knew Johnny. He just had triple bypass. He wasn't strong enough to come with us on the show tonight, but we'll have him on soon when he feels up to it to talk about Johnny and their relationship. But you were also on the LIWA, Moolah and Johnny May Young, when they kind of aggressively overtook that organization that was started by female legends, total legends, Penny Banner, who June Byers broke in, Betty Clark, and Ella Waldeck, and I think Ida Mae Martinez. But you were on those two boards consecutively, which no one ever had done. Those executive boards for both groups. Moolah in Vegas was the one that influenced Carl Lauer to drag CAC, move us from our beloved Sportsman's Lodge, LA location, where we would take one evening. It would be a third boxing, a third wrestling, a third real awards for movie and TV people. We did it all in one night. Jeff knows, all of you know. And now It takes two nights to do just a bunch of wrestling awards. But we did it in one at the far superior Sportsman's Lodge, Los Angeles location. But let me go to a young person here before we go to the rest of you guys in Toto with Tom, who absolutely knows his history. He's involved in so many aspects of the ISPW Tommy Fierro promotion, which is so incredible in the Jersey area and beyond. I mean, every weekend it seems like they have a huge event or a convention or a signing, always paying tribute to the 70s and 80s pro wrestling and having other people, on that are from the celebrity world that love wrestling too. He's an amazing promo guy, super sharp. He's, one of the core callers of Busted Open. They now have a 24/7 channel 156 on Sirius XM satellite radio. They are the biggest, easily, but no one comes close. Nobody's podcast, nothing comes close to Busted Open, which went from a 1 hour a week show to now it's an entire channel, nothing but wrestling, all the top guys, many of them from WWE. But what he did that's brilliant, he has on wrestlers as co-hosts from Bully Ray, Bubba Ray Dudley, Mark Henry, Nick Nemeth, Tommy Dreamer, so many others, Natty Neidhart. So let's go to Toto with Tom right now. History buff, manager like Russell.
I'm getting a phone call right now from one of the from the women's ISPW heavyweight champion, Tina San Antonio. Can you hold? Wait, she just hung up. Thank you for having me on the show this evening. I was on here for two reasons and two reasons alone. I was supposed to keep the good doctor in check tonight from the sermons that he has every 5 minutes. I've completely ruined that, okay? My bad. The other reason why I'm on here tonight is because one of my best friends for the last 25 years is on here tonight. He is Johnny Death. I would have never have heard of Johnny Legend if it wasn't for Johnny Death. And I found out that Johnny Legend was a wrestling manager. Now, as you all know, that is a lost art, okay? But Toto with Tom has brought it back the last 2 years in ISPW. I am bringing Wrestling Manager back into the fold. It's going to be the most important part of any show, and I do it with all respect to Johnny Legend. And I'd love to hear what my good friend Johnny Death has to say about him.
Wait. I forgot.
This is my show, Dr.
Jeff
Mike.
Walton.
Dr. Mike, this is my show now.
I ceded to you, but Jeff Walton, when I think I mentioned that, but didn't give it enough time. When our promotion closed, we were so proud and just total marks when he went to Memphis and became Tux Newman. And I forget how long it was, but the guys that he managed, he's battling with Jimmy Hart, and he takes Andy Kaufman. He starts managing Andy Kaufman, of all people. Lynn, Johnny's sister's husband, and more. Jeff, tell us about, just briefly before we go to a guy also in our world in Los Angeles. I knew him, lost touch with him, and Toto with Tom brought us back with him, me and the Dawson kids, meaning my best friends since first grade, uh, Richard Dawson's two sons, Mark and Gary. But Jeff, tell us about Tux Newman, because you blew us away. You dyed your hair. Where the fuck did it go? And tell us more about this.
Well, I like this look better.
Yeah,
It makes
you
me
look
look
good.
younger. Think about it, Glenn. Anyway, yeah, I went there after the Olympic kind of slowed down and finally closed, and um, he's 100% right. The stick man, as we call the managers, they're very important. They're the ones that bring people into the seats with the wrestlers. It is so important to have a good manager, and I'm glad that you are doing just that, and I'm going to look out for that myself. I had a good time. I made no money whatsoever, as usual.
Wait. It wasn't Nick Goulas who was paying you. It was Jerry Jarrett.
That's even worse. He didn't even pay the wrestlers that came to do television, and some of them came hundreds of miles on a Saturday morning to do the show, and he paid them zilch. He tried to fit them into the Coliseum cards if he could, but in most cases, you didn't make any money for television. So I had a good time. It was fun, and I look at the tapes once in a while, and I'm the only one. So I enjoy that, and I hope everything goes good with your managers.
Scotty, because I'm going to call on you some more, but if you can remember, do a Jimmy Hart and reel off. Jimmy Hart can do it like no one else. He has in his head, he can just clock it, and hundreds of talented he managed. But can you recall some or all of the guys your dad managed in Memphis? And again, the Saturday show was the highest rated show in not just in Tennessee, but Indiana on that when it aired. It had Japan-like numbers, where like 1 out of 3 people were watching the Jerry Jarrett, Jerry Lawler, Bill Dundee. Oh God, so much great talent there. Amazing people. Dutch Mantel. It was Eddie Marlin, 4 generations of family. Eddie Marlin, Miss Christine Jarrett, who promoted Nashville at the fairgrounds, Jerry Jarrett, her son, and then Jeff Jarrett, who's not only an on-air talent, but he's in creative at AEW. But Scotty, tell us everything you can about your own father, because you got to be a proud son. And you also, one of the core outstanding callers like Toto with Tom. Oh, so many others that busted open. But Scotty, the floor is yours.
Well, first off, if Dave LaGreca is watching and listening, hello to him from Busted Open. Tux Newman is back in Memphis. This is my dad right here. So, but he managed a lot of wrestlers that really got their start actually from Memphis, that really rose to the big time. And he managed some wrestler named Macho Man Randy Savage, if that sounds familiar to the fans. I'm sure it does. Bruiser Brody, Leaping Lanny Poffo, Iron Mike Sharp, the PYT Express of Novell Austin and Coco Ware. Cyclops was another one. The list goes on and on. Dr. D, David Schultz, another wrestler who came in that also my dad managed. So he managed an incredible talent of wrestlers that really, drew a lot of money for Memphis when they would have their Monday night wrestling cards at the Mid-South Coliseum. They would be selling out, every single Monday night, especially the Lawler and Savage feuds and stuff. It drew big houses, and and when my father as a manager, he got over so big, and it was just incredible. I mean, they hated him big time, but that's what he did. He made people mad. That was his job, and he did a wonderful job at it.
Scotty, can you tell us? Well, because I'm not going to ask Jeff this, I'm going to ask you, why did your dad bleach his hair, and how did he come up with Tux Newman? Which I laughed. I go, that is so Jeff when I first heard about it. But tell us kind of the stories. How did that come about? All of that, the character.
Well, from what I've been told is that he was he loved the wrestling business. He wanted to look at getting into something different, and he came across, if I believe, a magazine or a news article that had the name of Leo the Lion Newman. So what he did was he took the last name of Newman, and my dad would always wear a tuxedo. So with the tuxedo on Newman, that's how he came up with the name of Tux Newman. And he wanted to bleach the hair blonde, sometimes white and stuff, so he could have it's a different persona compared to Jeff Walton, so like nobody would recognize him, he'd be completely different. And so he took on a different approach and wanted to try managing. And originally he wasn't going to go to Memphis. Originally, he was actually going to go to Florida and work for Eddie Graham, but that's another story on another time. But he went into Memphis. They took him in for Jared, and at the time, Tom Renesto, the assassin, was the booker, and he came in there, I believe, in late January of 1985, and the rest was history.
I'm just getting word from 1970 Dick Lane. These wrestling exhibitions are sanctioned by the California State Athletic Commission and funded by our brother, the late Eric Caden, and his magnificent Hollywood book and poster store right on Hollywood Boulevard, amidst the head shops, the patchouli incense stores, the homeless folks peeing on the ground. So with that, a song that I played on the road driving Johnny around like to Clear Lake for one of his shows, that drove him nuts. I played it so often. Come on. Come on.
You want the MM2.
Oh, shit. Okay. Well, life happens.
You have to hit
Mike, for the sake of time and getting all your guests in, I just
Scott
drop this
Walton knows I
segment and
sneak
move
this
on.
into anything I do.
I just move on to the next guest. I strongly suggest
That
that.
basically sums up what Johnny was like in his head, a magical mystery tour. With that, let's go to Chuck, real name Johnny Death, who grew up. We knew him as Skippy in the 70s, the Dawson Kids and I, and we lost track with him. And now we hear he was like playing with Johnny, doing amazing things, amazing musical things. Globally, on a global level. And Johnny Death, D-E-T-H, everybody. He was the counterpart to Johnny Legend, the legend of pro wrestling. Johnny, thank you for being here. Thank you, Toto and Tom, for bringing us back together a couple of years ago. But thank you, Johnny, for being here. So the floor is yours. I'm shutting it up.
Sure. I met Martin, the man the world knew as Johnny Legend, in 1976. I met him at a little one-room comic book convention. He was selling stills, and we struck up a conversation. He was just finishing up Teenage Cruisers at the time. So I helped him a little bit in the editing room on that, and then we decided to make a couple of movies together. He was a restless spirit. He was an irrepressible creative. It's no wonder that he became a beloved figure in the world of wrestling and rockabilly and cult culture, because Johnny lived his life really on his own terms, wildly, iconoclastically, with really a singular devotion to making people, everyone around him, feel alive. He didn't just perform culture. He belovedly tried to preserve it through his work as a horror film archivist, a wrestling promoter, a creator of video series like Sleazemania. Johnny kept alive a vibrant underground world of movies and music that might have otherwise faded away. He really was, in my opinion, more than an artist. From 1977 till somewhere between 82 and 83, we were together almost every day. We lived like 4 blocks from each other in Venice Beach, California, and we were shooting 2 films at one time, which we eventually edited into one disastrous motion picture. Uh, as I said, more than an artist, really a force of nature. A band leader, archivist, wrestler, filmmaker. He was an impresario of the wonderfully strange and weird, and really a keeper of lost sounds. He had the vast collection, a very rare and strange vinyl, regular curator of unconventional, man whose long beard and fiery spirit became the stuff of legend itself. And though he's gone from this earth, and I hadn't seen him since '83. In 1984, I kind of walked away from Los Angeles and left that entire world and everything I had and knew behind and reestablished myself on the East Coast and kind of started over. We ran into each other maybe 10 or 15 years ago at a Chiller Theater convention, and it was almost as if we'd never been apart. We hung out most of the day, and he was doing great. Uh, his spirit is going to live on in every scratchy rockabilly record still spinning, and every B movie found and loved. Any young creator inspired to be just a little bit strange, he's living there too, a little wild or just completely themselves. And I'm looking forward if she pops in to saying hello to Lynn, because it's probably been 40 years since I've said hello to her. And we used to hang out a bit. We saw the first Star Wars movie together at the Chinese theater back in '77. And when I learned of his passing, it hit me uh, a lot harder than I had anticipated. So really, rest in peace, Johnny, the rockabilly Rasputin, heart of the underground, the one and only man. You are missed.
Oh, yeah, there's when they do that saying of they broke the mold. Well, there could be no mold. He encompassed so many genres of stuff that we all love. If it was unique, crazy, wild, fun, that was Johnny. I'm going to let all of you guys maybe ask Chuck, but let me just ask this: what was he like on the road traveling with them? Because I couldn't keep up with him, and I was younger, energy-wise at all. And he,
The
you know,
traveling I did with him was not music related. It was adult film related. There was a film that was traveling around, and somebody had to count the tickets sold and report back to the mafia and then take the print to the next place. And we did
jeez.
that for a little while. So on the road was crazy. Uh, and he was nuts. We were shooting one scene for a film in his apartment in Venice, and even though it was an X-rated adult movie, we didn't follow any of the rules. We had a very, very hilariously bloody sequence, and we shot all night. And I go to leave the next morning, and someone has blocked my car in to his driveway. Someone just blocked the driveway behind his apartment building. So we're standing out there calling for someone to come and move the fucking car. Pardon my French, to move the car. And he's covered in blood, and he's just a mess. He looks a mess. And me, I might have a little bit of blood on me. And as people were walking by, he would just turn and go, "Help me, please, help me, help me." And I would just look at him and go, "Unless that's your car, keep moving." And I don't know. He always cracked me up. He was always performing.
Always performing. Any of you guys have any questions for Johnny Death? How the hell did you go from Skippy to Johnny Death? That's quite the transition. But any of
Well,
you
I went
guys?
from Skippy to Charles to Chuck, and then Johnny Death shortly after Johnny Legend and I started hanging out.
Evan, do you have some questions for? Because a lot of genres there. I mean, we love
And I
Grindhouse, we
think
love
for
art
brevity
films.
of the program, we should probably move on to your other two guests.
All right. Okay. All right. Well, because Glenn Bray's our main event. Glenn, drink some water. You and I both have very little voice. Or do you want to speak first, or should we go to Pat and where's Danny? Did- no, you got to crank it up again. What happened to Danny Farron? Is he still there? I'm not seeing it. Maybe he's trying to get Kurt.
No, he
So
dropped
actually,
off. He dropped off.
He's having problems with connections. So,
okay. Well, Pat, Glenn, do you want to go first? Why don't we, make good use of your voice because I know you're suffering with a cold, and we really appreciate you as Johnny's longest, oldest friend. But you got to crank your audio up. We can't hear you.
Well, where's the audio?
It's depending on if you're an Apple or PC, it looks like an audio sound thing there. It sort of looks
Why
like.
don't you move on to Pat? Why don't you move on to Pat because his mic works fine.
Okay. Well, Pat Hode, I'm going to let you do your introduction because we were going to pair you with both Kurt Brown, Vandal Drummond, and Dan Farron. So maybe you can talk about those gents. But Pat Hode grew up near me in Los Feliz area, by everything. Channel 7 Studios was down there, Hillhurst, Vermont, all of that. But Pat has done so many things in wrestling besides being, a historian fan of all things Los Angeles, which dates back to like the prior to when the Olympic Auditorium was built for the Olympic Games. What year was it? 1928 or 1932, Pat?
32.
32 Olympics.
Yeah.
And you've done everything, but most notably doing what it was color. It wasn't play by play. Tell us about that show.
With you did the aforementioned Rob Black's XPW.
Oh yeah.
Which
is all over the world. That show was on.
Which was inspired by the character was Larry Rivera, inspired by the great Victor Rivera, who was working in L.A. at the time. 73. He feuded with Terry Funk for the America's title, and just a great character. But he spoke fluent Spanish. But even on Channel 34, he insisted on speaking English in a heavy accent.
Which is our Hispanic channel for our Wednesday TV, the Spanish one. The
right.
Saturday Dick Lane KCOP 13, that was all English. The Wednesday at the Olympic was, and so that was your character's name.
Right.
You took it from Victor Rivera.
Johnny had, a lot to do with. I'll get to that in a bit, but just to condense things here. I was playing in bands. I grew up in the Hollywood area. I was playing in bands, and I was a disc jockey at KXLU, which is the campus radio station of Loyola Marymount University. And we did some promotions with Hollywood Book and Poster. That's how I met Eric Hayden. And man, when I met him and went into that store, it just blew my mind. It opened up a whole new world, grindhouse, art films, everything. And Johnny was part of that whole, circle. And I didn't really see. First time I saw Johnny Legend's name was on the back of a Rhino wrestling videotape. I had like the Moondogs and the Fabs, Stan Lane, Steve Kern, those crazy, the crazy hardcore matches. And I think there was some, Randy Savage pile driving Ricky Morton on the table. So that's where I saw Johnny Legend's name on that tape. And I said, Johnny Legend. And finally I met him through Eric Hayden. We all went to, you remember Barry Richards, that debacle, California Championship Wrestling. We went to a show down at Fender's Ballroom. And that's where I got to know Johnny, talking to him back and forth. Oh, you produced Pencil Neck Geek? Really? It was just like he just threw that out there. Like, it was nothing. So, and then, we just kept together. He would come on my radio show, promote his stuff. And then comes Incredibly Strange Wrestling. And I was playing in a band called Foreign Object at the time, which was, punk rock and wrestling, a great mix of the two. And he would, put us on all the shows. And we would go to San Francisco. And that's when he let me try out at the time, I called it the Larry Rivera Experiment in front of a live crowd. With I don't know if you guys know who Ron Head is, but he's
Ron Head, Jeff J.R. Benson,
yes,
and the gal let me interrupt you for a second here,
Sure.
like I famously do. They were all doing little things like Jeff J.R. Benson was managing. Ron Head was very good announcer for both APW and some other NorCal indies, but specifically, as Russ remembers, APW and Stacy Goff, who ended up becoming Jim Cornette's wife and still is to this day.
That's right.
And they all left Northern California, their home, when I was living up there the 40 years before I moved back to LA. And they moved out to where Jim Cornette was producing a show for Smoky Mountain, one of the last great territory shows. Incredible. Jim Cornette's a genius. The weekly shows, the pay-per-views, all the talent. Amazing. He started so many folks. And Johnny Legend started Umaga of the Anawahe family, Peter Mavia, Rocky Johnson, The Rock, Dwayne Johnson. Umaga as a greenhorn rookie, clumsy and skinny. I got a zillion photos of him, but Johnny Legend gave him like his first gigs as a rookie when he got out of whoever trained him. And of course, Umaga passed away. His son now is Eddie Fatu, who's in the main events with Cody and Drew McIntyre. And, he was in the main event of last week's SmackDown, WWE SmackDown. Yeah. But so Umaga was a huge deal. And,
he gave him a shot. He gave him a shot, and he gave me a shot, because he stuck me with Ron Head. We started ripping off each other. The crowd, I could see whatever. I threw out some lines. The crowd was getting over. So I said, let me try and develop this thing. And I kept it going, sent a tape to the Rob Black office. And they called me back, said, come on in. Let's see if you can work with Chris Kloss. And rest is infamous or ugly history. I don't know, however you want to. But I love Johnny, man. He was like everybody here is saying. He was like Johnny Depp says, a force of nature, and you couldn't help but being caught up in the vortex, if you know what I'm saying. You got sucked in and along for the ride. And I played bass in his band too. For 2 or 3 gigs.
Didn't you have some involvement in Los Straitjackets? They wear wrestling masks. They're one of the world's biggest group. They are incredible. I think right out of here,
we tried to Foreign Object tried to do an angle with those guys. Say, hey, while we're playing, you guys come up and attack us with your guitars, but they wanted no part of that.
and at Rob Black's XPW, it folded, and then it's Booker and a genius who's doing all kinds of lucha things. Now Kevin Kleinrock started Wrestling Society X, which aired on MTV and VH1, and they had major groups, 3-6 Mafia, that would play, on the whole shows. And these are bands that were total wrestling marks. The guy who's in Ozzy Osbourne's band, amazing guitarist, I can't think of his name now, that had Black Label Society.
Zach
Wilde.
Yeah.
But Black Label, they played there a number of times for those Wrestling Society X tapings in downtown LA. And it kind of begat Lucha Underground. And I should say this.
Hey, sorry to interrupt you, Mike. I see Dan is back on.
Oh, hey, great. Let's bring you guys Dan? Together. And I hope Danny where is Vandal Plum and Kurt Brown? But anyway, Danny, let's you and Pat go to town here.
Okay, hang on one second. Hi, Pat. How you doing?
Hey, good. Good to hear you, Dan. This, as always. But
I literally had to all teams to put it back up again to get back on again, but I'm here. So I think it's some residue from the win we had earlier. So where are we at, Pat?
Well, I guess we can. You, Dan, more than anybody, probably you have a better memory than me. Kurt has a memory like a steel trap. But you talk about the Moguls shows, Incredibly Strange Wrestling. Burrito on a pole match.
I started going to Eric Caden's store, bless his heart, back in the early 80s. And I met Johnny through Eric. And then we all seemed to kind of gather together at the same time.
Exactly.
And Johnny was very, very careful about bringing anybody into like the circle, especially wrestling-wise. But he got to be very comfortable with me. And soon, and toward the late 80s, I was videotaping shows for him, going to, they used to do these shows called Muscle Rock that were out at different military bases. And we had guys like Eddie Guerrero on those shows. And then we were shooting those shows. And then we put together something called Hollywood Heavyweight Wrestling in 1990 when they first lifted the that you had to have a license to do that. And we did a show there in Moguls that in January of 1990. And we had Rey Mysterio Jr. on it and Conan on it. And it was a very, and we had music on it too, like Jeff was speaking earlier. We had some bands play, and it was a very successful show, except I learned a very important lesson that night. And that is, if you make a deal with the club about how many beers they sell, make sure they're not hiding the beers under the bar, so later on they don't have to. And that's what happened on the first show. But after that, Johnny would always have me on a show with him, mostly acting as the commissioner or occasionally the referee or the ring announcer. So that way he felt comfortable to run around and do all the stuff that Johnny did, and I would take care of the other stuff. We did shows everywhere and anywhere. And one day, Johnny's dream of doing this incredibly strange wrestling show came about, and we started doing those shows. And I got to tell you that in the beginning, I said to Johnny a couple of times, you know, as an old-time wrestling guy, some of this stuff is a little weird, even for me. You know, I feel like I'm really open to all this stuff. But we started having these shows, and it was amazing. The Pro Wrestling Observer readers voted Incredibly Strange Wrestling the worst promotion in America, and yet no one had seen it because it wasn't on TV or anywhere. You had to be there in person. But just the existence of it horrified the wrestling fans, and they voted that way. One of the shows that is kind of bittersweet but nice was we had Chris Farley showed up for one of the shows, and he told everybody how he was fresh out of rehab, and he was running around, and his girlfriend who was with him that night told my wife, yeah, Chris is out, but he's okay now. He can drink. It's not a problem. And everybody kept buying him beers because he was Chris Farley and other drinks. And we tried to get him into the ring at one point, but he wouldn't do that. But they had to walk him out at the end of the night. And I remember one of the guys saying, he's not going to last a year. And I said, I don't think he'll make it through the next 3 months. And like 2 months later, he died. And we
his
had
shirt,
pictures.
the buttons on his shirt. I remember he was at the bar at the same time
Yeah.
I was, and the buttons on the shirt looked like they were going to just, bust open.
Oh, yeah.
Because the
was
shirt was
enormous
so
at that
tight, he
point.
was sweating like
He was in really,
yeah.
yeah. And that was not unusual for there because we always had, I don't know if you remember the night, Pat, where we had the gaggle of porn stars come in. I think
Yes.
Sharon Mitchell was leading in them that night. And they came there, and we were working with a guy named Supreme, Lester, who unfortunately has left us early also. But he was this big little cannonball of a guy. And the thing was, the people would stand around the ring, right there at the apron. And we would tell people, I'm sure you watch this on TV, but if people are going to be bouncing off in the ropes and everything and falling out of the ring, there's a good chance you're going to get hit.
So stand
And
back,
everybody-
please.
Yeah, and everybody was like, ha, ha, ha. Oh, no, the wrestlers know what they're doing. Ha, 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 ha. And a sequence went down, and Supreme started running those ropes, and then he did a dive over top of the rope. And then it was like bowling for porn stars. They were flying every which way up in the air. And I remember actually helping Sherry Mitchell back up to her feet at that point, and he said, stand in the back, right? I said, yes, stand in the back if you want to. But that kind of stuff always happened on Incredibly Strange. We did, oh my God, this would be something to get us thrown out now quickly. We did a burrito on a pole match where they had a pole with the burrito tied to it. What Johnny used to do was sometimes I'd be announcing, and he would come down and whisper a change real quick in my ear, and he would say, okay, in about 3 minutes, this is going to happen. I said, okay. So we would have to go with it and do that. The wrestlers loved it because actually, as opposed to a lot of the other shows they worked, they got paid. They didn't always get paid for a lot of the independent shows, but they got paid for these shows. I love working with Johnny. Johnny was the best. Like I said, I met him in the late '80s. We did all kinds of stuff together. I don't think I ever had a bad evening with him, whether it was on the phone, whether it was talking. When I found out that he had passed, one of the things I said to my wife, I just said, I feel really, really bad. But every time I started thinking of him, I started to laugh, or I get the giggles because of something that he did or something he would say. One of my favorite things that he used to do was he would yell at a kid in the audience and say, hey, you, why don't you be the first one on your block to move? Just something stupid like that. But Johnny could do it that way. And everybody would get upset, but they still kind of loved him in a way. He did a show out in some park downtown where they were taping it for cable access television. I don't know if you remember this, Pat. You remember? Johnny was wrestling. I don't know who it was, but he wound up. It wound up being all over the field, in the field, in the stands, and finally, the show ended with Johnny. He had climbed on top of the television truck, and he was screaming and waving from there, and that's how the show went off the air. So you never knew what Johnny was going to come up with, and I know a lot of I've been independent wrestling shows in Southern California since the late '80s, and still do a few today on occasion. But Johnny's were always the most fun, always the most unpredictable, and even when we after he moved or whenever he would call from the time, or he would come down with this master plan to do another show or something, and he would call me up and say, "What are you doing Saturday night?" And I go, "I don't know, but sure, I'm in." And like I said, I owe a lot to Johnny over the years. And it was also, actually, I took one time for Jason Hervey, the nasty little brother on the Wonder Years, because he decided he wanted to be. He was hanging out with Louis Spicoli, and they said, "Can we working for a bit?" And we said, "Okay, he's going to try to get in the ring and do something, and we're going to hold that." I'm much bigger than Jason Hervey is, but when it was time to take the bump, I took the bump because that's what you had to do. There's a lot of shows you did also. We used to go down to Tijuana with Kurt and those guys.
That's right.
Down there. Were you there the night that Conan started off all the kids were chasing Johnny and giving him a hard time?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, the kids all thought that Johnny was Santa Claus. And they were chasing him like, Santa Claus, Santa Claus. And Conan turned around and raced into them his best Cuban insults that he could come up with. And those kids screamed and ran off.
We were giving flowers. Let me just interrupt and I want to get you guys finish up. We were giving flowers, obviously, to our brother Eric Caden, who, like Glenn, and we can't say enough good things about Eric because that was like the Disneyland of all insane stuff plus pro wrestling that we all love to go to. I went there, and I used to, at the beginning, until I got smartened up, I was giving Jeff my negatives. I would get my art images, go to Photomet, get all my shots developed, bring my negatives to Jeff, who would, then pick whatever he wanted to. And he got my shot of Piper on that Madison Square Garden cover. What was it, 78? At Madison Square Garden for Vince Sr., with the bagpipes and stuff, as well as my Chavo picture. When they came in for the one shots, like Eddie Graham and Vern Gagne would send them to, just so they could say they were on an MSG show. But our office sent them, well after the Victor Rivera and Black Gordman and John Tolis went out there. John Tolis had that main event with Bruno in 75. But talk about Larry Doyle, your partner, because he was an incredibly nice guy. We lost him, and we want to pay our respect and flowers and love to Larry Doyle, too, your partner, Eric.
Larry was my partner doing
in promoting
shows. We're promoting together, and we did a show out in La Puente that basically ended up in a riot and had the came out, and it was Sabu and Terry Funk and Al Snow, and they basically just tore the place down. That was the police drove up, and I was the referee, and I was standing there, and they looked at me and they said, "What's going on?" I said, "Professional wrestling." I said, "Oh, okay," and they drove away because it wasn't like, it wasn't worth getting out of the car. I remember we had Johnny on, and the dressing room was about a house about 2 doors down. It had like a balcony on. I was standing up there watching all the chaos and the rain going on and whatever. And he said to me, "Hey, this reminds me of the Olympics. I love this. It's great to be back again." But also be talking about Larry was a sweet guy. He lived us like 38, and it was in 1998 actually. He was very young. And if he had lived a little bit longer, and when podcasting came in, he would have taken off with that because he had the personality. He was great at that, and he loved being around it. And I would say to him, "Hey, we're doing the show this weekend," and he would get this big shit ass grin on his face and say, "Is John involved?" And he goes, "Yeah." And he goes, "I'm in." Yeah. One of my favorite memories about Eric, and like I said, I loved Eric. Eric was wonderful. It was one year, Johnny and Eric, and they were like Laurel and Hardy when they were together. It was like a great comedy team watching the two of them. Eric had wanted to tape the Hollywood Christmas parade, which went down the street right in front of the
call it by its right
Park.
name, Santa Claus Lane fucking parade.
Sorry, Santa Claus Lane. What he did was we got the video cameras out, and Johnny basically did play-by-play. I believe this was released as a video. I think it was called Play in Hell or something like that. But he went down, and I would sit there and I would look and see who was coming in and write a note. Like there was an actor coming down, and I wrote a note. This woman had her blouse whipped off her by Faye Dunaway in this movie, and I would hand it to him, and then Johnny would just roll with that. And but put stand there and putting on, and somebody would come by, some kind, nice person on a sitcom, and Eric would be waving at them, and they would look over at him, and then Eric would start flipping them off, just to get the reaction for the video. So it was a lot. It was a lot of. It was like hanging out with the bad kids who weren't really the bad kids in high school all over again.
Let me say this quickly about the Torrance show. You had me shoot it, but two things of note there. In the back, Terry Funk was like talking about ring psychology and stuff. And all of the boys, including Osama Nishimura and Al Snow, Osama just passed a couple of months ago in Japan. He was still with New Japan. But Osama Nishimura and Al Snow had an incredible match then. This was before anybody'd seen Al, and he still had we were super short hair. But then there was this shoot in ring, and I don't know what the hell was going on, but Road Warrior Hawk was not cooperating with Danny Severn, the MMA god from UFC. Yeah. What was going on with that one? Because that whole show is incredible. But to see all of those boys, the talents, and Damien 666, incredible lucha star, and more.
I think maybe it might be a good idea if we moved on to Glenn and had a chance to have Glenn speak.
All right. Well, we're going to have to. I see everybody applauding. I see that.
Great guest for us in the future.
Right. We'll get Glenn and Kurt and Pat on just a separate show, and we'll talk about that.
Absolutely.
Let's introduce Glenn Bray. Glenn has done so many things, comic book world, but he goes back with Johnny. Let me have you do your own introduction, and I'll just shut up, Glenn, and let you have it because you are our main event player. You knew Johnny Martin the longest, and as we wait still for Lynn, who had to take her cat to this vet that was hours away. She's in a rural part of Oregon. Her cat, of course.
The cat's dead by now. I think the cat's dead by now.
No. The cat is fine. She sent me a photo. Okay, Glenn Bray, Los Angeles legend and total historian.
Is my audio on?
It could be louder, Glenn.
It's still very faint.
I think Jeff, as Tux Newman, has been effing around with your audio. Maybe Scott.
I'd like to F around with you.
Can you hear me?
Let him talk.
You can't hear me. You can't hear me? No.
Can you guys
Yeah,
hear
we
Glenn
can,
okay?
we can hear you,
We
Glenn.
can
so
hear
low.
him, but not loud.
Ah, okay. Is this better? I'll
Yeah.
try.
Shout
Better?
like your life
better,
depends
yeah.
on it.
Okay.
Because it does.
Well,
Yes.
thank you for organizing this tribute to my old
No, thank you.
chum buddy, Martin. And I can't call him Johnny Legend because I only know him as Martin. And I met him, we were probably 10 years old. I went to, there was a Halloween night, and he lived 2 blocks away from me. And I knew kids on that block, but I didn't know Martin. And they said, come on over. It's a great place. You can get candy on this street. So I was maybe, I'm thinking 10 or 11. And we went to this one house on Orange Grove, and it was open, and it was a spook house. And you walked in the front door, and in Martin's living room, they had chairs with blankets, and he had an 8mm movie playing on the wall, and just crazy music going on and everything. So I don't know that I even met him that night. I was just entranced that this guy put on this little show. So I went back. Can you hear me okay? Okay.
You were doing pretty good there.
Okay. So I think I went back in another day or so and actually met Martin, went into the back room there where he was living with his brother. And I walk in, and he's got copies of Famous Monsters. He's got old comic books. He's got movie stuff. And we just clicked and never stopped clicking after that. He was the only guy. We had other friends, but nobody else was into that pop culture stuff. And I later realized that we both grew up in San Fernando, which was an incorporated city, and we had not only 2, but actually 3 movie theaters in the town that we could walk to. One showed nothing but old movies on the weekends, 3 old movies for a quarter. The other movie theater was a new movie theater that showed 2 first-run movies. And then we also had a Mexican movie theater because it was San Fernando, mostly Mexicans. We had mom and pop drugstores, liquor stores that had wall-to-wall comics and magazines. And then I just remembered when Martin and I would walk downtown, we'd walk down this industrial street, First Street, and there was a building there that was repairing jukeboxes. And they had stacks and hundreds of 45s that you could buy for a quarter. And I think at that time, 45s were a buck at least, but we both, amassed a huge collection of just oddball juke records. So in all that said, we had nothing but movies to look at, old movies, new movies. We had nothing but paper culture to soak up in, and we had music. So I know that's where it started for both of us. We would both work off each other and excite each other with new finds. And I don't know if Martin introduced me to wrestling or if we just both had it. I know his first match was Blassie versus Ricky Starr, and that wasn't at the Olympic. It was the somewhere else, the
Long Beach or Santa Monica.
Sports Arena. And then I went just a few weeks later, and I saw my first match was Blassie versus Roca. And then after that, then we started going together. And we went almost every Friday match they had. Before Martin and I could drive, we'd take the bus from San Fernando. We'd make a stop at Pershing Square. That's how we found out about those Pershing Square bug house people. We'd make the stop over for about an hour there, catch the next ride to the Olympic and get there about 5 o'clock and watch all the wrestlers come in and get their autographs and stuff. And we were so surprised that Freddie Blassie, the guy who's groin kicking people in the ring and biting their head, he was like Santa Claus to us. He said, "Hi boys, how you doing? I'll sign all your autographs and everything." So it was just really strange and weird and great time of our life. And of course I met Jeff and Terry in the back hanging out too.
That's Terry Brote. Yeah.
and Jeff introduced us to these old movie serials that he could rent. He had a projector, and we'd never, back then you couldn't see any of that old stuff. It was just totally off the radar. And Jeff also introduced us to movie poster service in Kentucky or somewhere. You remember what that was, Jeff? You'd send off a list. You'd write on a piece of paper, I want 1 sheets of King Kong, Mighty Joe Young, Creature from the Black Lagoon, Frankenstein. Well, you wouldn't get most of that stuff, but you get Creature from the Black Lagoon 1 sheet, and Mighty Joe Young 1 sheets for $1. And this is what, early 70s. It's got to be.
Yeah.
I'm thinking. Or maybe even late 60s, probably. I don't remember. But yeah, Martin and I just we rolled each other on popular culture before it was known as popular culture. And well, yeah, I want to show you this.
Ooh, ooh.
Okay.
What's the venue? What is that the Olympic or the sports arena?
And I'm
The
gonna.
Olympic.
And you notice the date?
November 20, oh wow, when Kennedy was shot, November 22nd, 1963. Did they go on with the show?
So Martin and I are at Sylmar High School at noon. The loudspeaker comes on. We're eating lunch. The loudspeaker comes on. John Kennedy has been assassinated. We're suspending class today. Go home and mourn. So I look at Martin. I go, fuck. We got tickets to the Olympic tonight. Are they gonna? What's gonna happen? Are they gonna show or not? I think I could drive at the time. I was 15 and a half, and I had a car and I could drive. So we took a chance, and we drive down there, not knowing if they're going to be open or not. Drive into the parking lot. It's full. We get out. We do our thing. We take I think we pre-bought tickets back then, and we walk in. We get our seats or walk around. We never had regular seats because we spent so much time back by the dressing room. But we're waiting for Jimmy Lennon to come out and do a big spiel about the assassination, and it doesn't happen. And they start the matches, and we're going like, this is kind of strange. It's like nothing happened today. And the whole night went on, had the big match. I don't remember who won or whatever. And Martin and I are kind of like looking at each other, and we walk out the back door that at the end into the parking lot going to my car. And I don't know if Martin and I, we saw this hillbilly guy, this funny looking hillbilly guy. And I or Martin said, what do you think? Like, wasn't it strange that nobody said anything about Kennedy being killed today? And the guy looked at us and he said, well, the man's dead. And Martin and I just looked at each other and like howled. And we said that for months afterwards, like, the man is dead. It's like, that's it, he's dead. So the Olympic just didn't bother reflecting that day. It was just strange. I guess it was just policy that, have a good time. I don't know. What do you think, Jeff?
I
Were you there?
and we had a good time together back there. We had a lot of fun. Those were good years, and that's stuff you remember, And each of us here tonight, we remember something about Martin that's really special. Well, no matter if he did something crazy, or if he was serious, or if he was telling you something you didn't know about and it came true. That was Martin. He was a wonderful guy. And I'm like Glenn. I don't know him as Johnny Legend, although I know of Johnny Legend and known what he's done. But he's always Martin. Martin Margulies to me, and a dear friend. I'll never forget him. Never.
You know where he got the name Johnny Legend?
No.
We were at Capitol record store meet where they had a swap meet for records, and Capitol Records started at 4:00 in the morning and ended before the sun came up. And I don't know, I think Martin found this record called Songs for Prisoners or something by Johnny Legend. And he took that name from that record. I think I've got a copy somewhere. It's a totally unknown recording of songs about prisoners. So that's where he got that name. excuse me.
Filmed on 8mm, I think well before Brittany's Rocky and some other folks filmed, they'd sneak in an 8mm or 60mm camera. You filmed some of these classic bouts that there's no TV on, particularly Blassie and Bobo and Dick the Bruiser and Bearcat, etc. But you also filmed them while you two guys as kids, maybe Jeff tagged along, bothering and upsetting Freddie Blassie and Hardboiled Haggerty at the beach, I think Santa Monica and Venice. Tell us a little about that, because you have footage of that. It was they were mock healing on you, but tell us about that.
Well, oddly enough, we got to know Fred just in the back of the Olympic Auditorium, getting his autograph and talking to him, and give him the wink, like, kill him tonight, Fred. And yeah. He knew we were in on it, but we would never breach the subject to him. And he one day he said, if you guys are around during the week, I'm at Muscle Beach. I'm not in front of Muscle Beach, but I'm on the other side of the pier, and I'll be there. I'm just sunning and jumping in the ocean and stuff. He said, come on down and visit me. So, shit. Okay. So me, Martin, and Dennis went down, and I had my 8mm camera, and we filmed Fred on his towel and messing around with people and going in the ocean. And then you'd walk on down to Muscle Beach, and you saw Hardboiled Haggerty. We had the Fabulous Kangaroos were there. Baron Leone was there all the time playing chess, and just all kinds of people. It was a different time,
It was a magical time. That was Johnny. Johnny called it the magic time. And we're talking, your period of Blassie is the greatest heel California ever saw. Sorry, Ray Stevens and Pat Patterson. You're talking like 61 through 63. And when he turned babyface, the cage thing with the Sheik and Abdullah Farouk, Ernie Roth, 1970, solidified it with Rocky Johnson in a scientific match where I think Fred said he'd leave town if he pulled one underhanded tactic to use Blassieism. He didn't. It was amazing. And then we're on to the races with the greatest feud of all time, in my opinion, any territory.
Mike, I think we're
Let me finish up.
Let me
finish up. Tolis
and
Blassie,
I think
greatest angle ever. Okay, we'll revisit all this.
So why don't we wrap this up with everybody and be able to say goodnight to everyone. I really appreciate their patience and staying here for the entire length of this show. It was, with this extra time that we gave everybody, so we appreciate that very much.
We thank you, Russ. Let's thank everybody. The show's about Johnny. We thank you all to be here in support of Johnny Legend. We love and miss him. I just want to thank all of you guys, every single one of you guys, and we'll try to revisit this. And here's a song to end the show. I want to thank Evan Ginsberg, obviously. I want to thank all of you, and Brittany Brown, and Johnny Death, and the musicians. Maybe we can there's got to be somebody alive there. Evan Ginsberg, obviously, Danny Farron. Maybe you guys can bring Kurt Brown, you and Pat. Obviously, Toto with Tom and Scott Walton. But this is a song. All right, for everybody here at Wrestling and Everything Coast to Coast, we love you, Johnny Legend. We talk a lot about legends. You were truly a legend. We love you. We miss you. That's it for now. Thank you, Russell, and thank you, everybody. And Godspeed. God bless Johnny Legend, Martin, and his sister, Lynn. Thank you, everybody. Good night.
Good night.